Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today we're going to be looking at all the books that I read in November. So if you remember what my TBR was like for November, it was pretty ambitious. And then I immediately went into a reading slump and pretty much didn't read for the first 2 weeks in November. But I have managed to read 7. So I read quite a few sort of different things this month. The first book I'm going to speak about is She, Myself and I by Emma Young. She, Myself and I follows 18-year-old Rosa, who lives in London with her parents and her charming older brother, and she's quadriplegic. She has a terminal nerve disease, and basically her body's just deteriorating and her prognosis isn't good. At some point she is going to die, and the only real option she has comes in the form of this risky transplant surgery. So there's this experimental surgery in America where they'll do a brain transplant. It's just a waiting game for a donor. So this book follows the procedure from when a donor is found. Then that sets off Rosa. She goes to America to get this surgery, and the surgery is successful. So she is her brain's transplanted into this new body, and obviously she has more freedom now than she's had in a very long time. Her future's kind of opening up for her, but she's absolutely obsessed with who her donor body was, and she wants to find out more about her, and feels like she can't move on with her life until she knows whose body she's in. And obviously she'd already agreed that she wouldn't do that. So it's kind of like a journey of self-discovery, a bit of, figuring out what your identity kind of means and things like that. It's really, really good. It kind of obviously covers like sort of heavy issues, but done really, really well. One of the things I liked best in this book was the relationship between her and her brother. It is so heartwarming. They're so close, and it's basically what you'd like, your ideal relationship with a brother or a sister. You know what I mean? It's like a lovely, lovely relationship, and you don't often get that. I don't think familial relationships are focused on enough in books, and it was so nice. Like whenever they interacted, it just made my heart melt. They were lovely. The parents, they were nice. They were really lovely. They had obviously just gotten so overprotective because of their daughter's condition, and her mother was a scientist and kind of was really focused on getting the surgery and doing it all right and things like that. So her parents could be kind of stifling at times, and when she gets to the point she's trying to discover who she is, they kind of maybe find a hard time giving her the space she needs, which I can see why that she would find that frustrating, but also it's very understandable why they are the way they are. But that obviously causes a little bit of a clash later on in the book, but it's nice to see kind of the resolution of that and things. So it's very, very good. She has a bit of a romance along the way. I don't feel like the romance was necessary for the book. I think the book held up on its own without that. So I don't know, I would put that out as a bit of an unnecessary feature. It could have just been a friendship, in my opinion. But it was fine. It wasn't harmful in any way. It was quite cute, so I'm not mad at it. I just don't think it was needed. I think my only real complaint is I wanted more. I wanted it to go a bit deeper. It stopped at a point in the book where I was like, oh, I wanted it to go further. I wanted to know more of what happened. But obviously the book wasn't kind of about the next stage, I suppose. I think the author could have gone deeper into the topics. I kind of like these sort of ethical dilemma kind of issues and stuff. It was really interesting. But I suppose if she'd gone deeper, it would have taken away from the more light-hearted aspect of the book. So I can understand why she kept it the way she did. Yeah, I gave this one a 4-star. I thought it was really solid. There was definitely areas that I would have it tweaked a little bit if I was giving it a 5-star, but overall I was really happy with how this one went, and I would definitely recommend it. I thought it was really, really good. So the next book I read this month before I got kind of slumpy was The Stranger in My Bed by Karen King. This is an arc I got via NetGalley just in return for an honest review, and it was a really good read. I think I gave this one a 4-star. It was definitely a solid 4. Really, really enjoyed this one. So it follows married couple Freya and Phil. I want to say Keegan. doesn't matter. It follows Freya and Phil, and they've been married for a couple of years, and their relationship is just not in a very good place. They argue, and Freya feels like she's walking on eggshells all the time, and and Phil can like fly off the handle. There's one big argument where I think it's a vase gets thrown and they both end up with cuts, and Phil storms off into the night saying he's had enough, and Freya's like, yep, I've had enough too. We're going to seriously hurt each other if we carry on doing what we're doing. So she decides then that she's going to leave Phil. So she's packing her bags ready to go. It's all in the car, and she gets a knock at the door, and it's the police, and they tell her that Phil has been in a car accident. He's in hospital. So she's like, oh my God. And as you would, rushes to his bedside to see if he's okay. So this throws her into total turmoil, because she's like, well, I was going to leave, but now he's in hospital, and what do I do? And then this gets even more complicated by the fact that he wakes up and he doesn't remember the last couple of years. He's completely forgotten all of the fights, all of the rows, all of the bad feeling, the injuries, everything. He can't remember any of it. He remembers them going on this great honeymoon and getting off the plane and being deliriously happy newlyweds, and has no recollection of the last couple of years. So Freya's really stuck here. She's like, well, he doesn't remember all the things I want to leave him for. Should she give him another chance? If he doesn't remember doing any of this stuff, does it mean he won't do it again? Or does it mean it's inevitable he would do it again? So she's really unsure of what to do next, and obviously feels like she'd be a bit of a rubbish person to leave someone who's just had an accident and has lost their memory. So the book follows her kind of trying to figure out what's the best decision to make, and obviously Phil trying to recover a little bit and hopefully try and get his memory back, because once he realizes he's lost his memory, he's so insecure and confused because he doesn't know what he's missed out. He doesn't know what everyone else knows that he doesn't know. So it's really interesting, and I didn't realize actually until I got further into the book, you actually get more than one point of view. So you hear from Freya mulling over what should she do, should she give him another chance, could she trust him? And you hear from Phil, who's totally confused about why his wife that he thought was perfect is acting so strangely around him, and not being as affectionate as he remembers. And so it's really good to have both of them, and she's not trusting him because she knows what he's capable of or what he did in the past, and he starts to not trust Freya because he's like, well, she's acting so weird, like what's going on? Was there something sinister here? Do I need to be scared? So that was a really interesting kind of aspect to it, and I really enjoyed this book. Everything in the book kind of wrapped up really satisfying. I really enjoyed how it ended. And I think this is a really, really good read. Moving on to an audiobook that I listened to this month. This one is called Also Human by Caroline Elton. And Caroline Elton is a psychologist who speaks to doctors like at different stages of their careers if they're having any issues, like, with stress or finding things difficult to deal with, or issues with their supervisors, or lots of different issues. So she, talks through different patients. I think she changed all their details and names and stuff, but she spoke through clients, doctors that she'd had spoken to over the years, and the different problems that they'd faced, either becoming a doctor or once they'd qualified, or what specialty to choose, or if even medicine was the right career for them. In fact, it was quite a common concern, was like, do they even want to carry on in medicine? So I really enjoyed this one. I think this was another 4-star. I really enjoyed it. Listening to a lot of the concerns that these doctors had, there was lots of different issues raised through kind of sexuality and race, and the pressures put on junior doctors, and just the ways the profession was taught and what was expected of these doctors. Really, really interesting. The overwhelming kind of impression I got from the book was that the medical profession, with it being like one of the world's oldest professions, it's like it hasn't moved on with the times. I don't know if it's the way it's taught, because it's like the experienced members passing down their knowledge and practice to the younger members. It seems to carry on a lot of the way it's always been done kind of thought, or we had to work this hard when we did it, so now you have to work this hard. Like the opinions, like I said, with to do with like race and sexuality and things like that, it's just like whether more modern professions, I think, are more able to adapt to changing beliefs and viewpoints. I feel like medicine is definitely sort of stuck in a rut, and I think a lot of the issues raised were to do with the fact that medicine just hasn't, like I said, really moved on with the times. And it was really interesting. It was definitely worth a read. I found it really enlightening in ways, and made me think of my own kind of beliefs when it comes to doctors. My only complaint, I would say, that I would take it off of being a 5-star is I think some areas could have been more concise. In places, definitely, the point got kind of buried in how much she over-explained things. So yeah, I think if the book could have been made more concise and sharper, I think it would have been a bit more hard-hitting. It was very, very good. That was my only kind of complaint, is I think it just was a little bit longer than it needed to be in places. So back to another ebook, We Regret to Inform You, by Ariel Kaplan. This follows Misha, wait till I butcher her name, Abramovicius. I'm not going to try and say that again because I'm pretty sure that's wrong. Misha. Misha is in private school. I think it's called Blanchard Prep. And she's been put there. Her mom's like worked really, really hard, scraped and saved, and to get her through this private school, to give her the best chance of going to a good university, to, you know, set her up for life kind of a thing. And Misha has pulled out her weight. She's done all the studying. She's gotten good grades. She's padded her resume with all the, you know, the stuff you could want to put on your application for college, and time has now come for the applications, and she's been rejected by everywhere. She's absolutely devastated and can't understand what's happened. She thinks something must have gone wrong. There's just no way that she would have been rejected everywhere. And yeah, so this book kind of follows her kind of trying to figure out what happened. So she, you know, her and some of her friends are kind of looking into why she didn't get into any of the schools she wanted to get into. I kind of expected this book to be a bit more about dealing with the rejection and dealing with, okay, she got rejected from uni, but what are her other options? Where else could she go? Could she apply later? Could she apply again? Could she take a year out? Could she get an internship? I just thought there was going to be a bit more of a, oh my god, I got rejected, this can't be happening to me. Okay, what's the next best thing? Because at the end of the day, uni's not for everybody. It's not the end of the world if you don't get into uni. And I kind of feel like that's the message I was expecting from the book, which it did kind of touch on that. The book kind of took more the route of, right, her transcripts were interfered with or something, and, you know, she wanted to find out kind of why she was rejected. She ends up, her and her friend Nate, who I love. I'm so pro Nate. I think Nate is fantastic. He is so adorable. My favourite character in the book by far. He's just a little sweetie pie. And he, you know, he was exploring his sexuality, he had issues with mental health. He was just a nice, well-rounded kind of guy. I really enjoyed anytime Nate was on the page. He was really, really cool. Misha, not so much. Misha was generic and dull and kind of entitled. You know, she had a bit of a chip on her shoulder. Like, you know, she felt like because her mom had to save so much to get into the school and her life wasn't as easy as her richer classmates, that, you know, she worked harder, and it was almost like she had a bit of a superiority complex in a way, because she's like, well, I had to work harder, I deserve this more, kind of a thing. She just, I think it was on purpose that she literally had nothing else to her personality or her life apart from her school achievements and her extracurricular activities. I think in the race to get into a good school, she literally stopped living, stopped having a personality, a life that she genuinely was passionate about, and everything was just to pad this application. And it was very evident that, like, you know, once it was clear she didn't have that place at the school she wanted, everything fell apart for her. She was just like, well, what else is there? And like, that's sad. That's really depressing that someone would feel that, like, if they haven't gotten into a good university, that what else is there? You know, let's give up. Let's just go live in a basement. Let's just, whatever. She just, it was very much like life was over, and I just feel like that's a really sad place to be in, and that's not, it's not a healthy place to be in if you have nothing. She just went from, this is all I was, and now I don't have that, so who am I? Which I think that was the purpose of the book, and the fact that she was trying to figure out, well, who is she without all the education stuff? So that, that was good, and that did kind of follow what I was expecting from the get-go. So like I said, it kind of went more down the route of what happened to my application. So she gets some help from a group of girls called the Ophelia Syndicate, and these girls are really clever, kind of hackers, and they look into what went wrong with the application process for Misha. And these girls, like, they're not necessarily the most likable. They're kind of like abrupt, and they're different. But I mean, I liked them. I thought they were far more interesting than Misha was. It's kind of like they were who they were, and they were okay with it, and I respected that. I think the fact that they were just individuals. They weren't just this. What is it the book actually described Misha as? A college application in human form. That's literally all she was. These girls actually had thoughts and opinions, and they just stood out more. I like the Ophelia Syndicate. So they were looking into kind of what happened, and yeah, no, it was really, really good. I did enjoy it. The first near enough half of the book was Misha flapping. And at the start, when you were, getting her rejections in, and it was quite funny, like in a bad way, but it was quite funny and entertaining to read. But then it just went into darkness and despair of, oh, I have nothing, what am I going to do? And she's like lying to people to try and cover it up because she's embarrassed, but she just can't function. And I was just like, okay, for a little while that was justified, I get that. But I was like, that bit went on too long, and I was genuinely getting like secondhand anxiety off of her. It's like, oh my God, just stop being ridiculous. You're going to need to make a plan. You're going to need to actually do something and not just flap. Once we got into the meat of the story and the Ophelia Syndicate came into it, and they were looking into stuff and sneaking around to try to find out what was going on, that was really good. I really enjoyed that. It was unexpected. It wasn't, like I say, what I really expected the book to be about. I thought there'd be a little bit of an element of that, but dealing with the rejection would be the higher part of it, and it was definitely swapped. It was the investigation that was a bigger part of the book, and the dealing with rejection was kind of more minor. But yeah, the second half of the book was really good. I gave it a 3.5 stars. Just because it took far too long to get into the meat of the story. Just the flapping took too much time. And just because Misha, I feel like she just wasn't a strong enough main character. Although it could have been on purpose, and if it was on purpose, I get why it was. But equally, she just never really stuck out to me. She was just so generic. So yeah, I think that's what let it down. But overall, pretty good. I would definitely say I enjoyed it, and, would say definitely give it a go. But go into it knowing what you're going to get. I was a little disappointed because it wasn't what I thought it was, but that's not the book's fault. But it was a good read. I did enjoy. So back into the realm of non-fiction, one of my favourite reads from this month was The Worry Cure by Robert Leahy. This one I also gave a 4-star to. I listened to this as an audiobook, and it was about 3.5 hours, nearly 4 hours, I think. But it packed a punch. It was really, really good. So the book, it talks about sort of 7 steps to deal with kind of your general worries, and trying to change your thinking when it comes to worries. Identify your patterns of worry and things like that. This one was recommended to me by a friend who, like me, worries a lot. And it's weird, we're similar in the fact that we worry a lot, but we worry differently. There were some parts that were so me, and it was like, this is exactly how my brain works. And it was really interesting having that described to me, this is exactly how my brain works. It was really good. I found it really interesting. It was so dead on in ways to describe how my brain works, and the bits that I didn't relate to described my friend. So we actually have had quite a few discussions about this book, which is really good, very interesting. And I think anyone that is a general worrier can find something to take away from this book. I can't imagine there wouldn't be something you could take away from it. I finished it and I already want to reread it. And there was also an aspect of me finding it comforting because it described how I think. And there was something comforting about that. Even though it was obviously describing things that I'm doing that are less than ideal, the fact that I felt like it was understood in a way. I was like, I like this. So yeah, I feel like this one I'll probably reread pretty soon actually, because I did find it very helpful. And I've already started to try and implement some of the things that the author spoke about. Definitely recommend this one if you're a warrior. Give it a listen. It's like not even 4 hours of your life if you listen to it. Be very, very quick to read. It's worth it. So definitely give this one a listen. And if you read anything from this one, this is probably the one I would recommend the most, just because of how useful I found it. Obviously, if you're not a non-fiction person, then it probably won't be for you, but it is super, super short and very straightforward. So you might end up liking it even if you're not a non-fiction person. So in an overall pretty strong month, I think everything was a 4-star up until now, apart from one 3.5-star. So it's been a pretty strong month despite the fact I've not read as much as I wanted. This, unfortunately, is the one blip. So this one is another art copy I got via NetGalley, and it's called Dead Girl Walking by Roberta Gately. So the premise of this one is there's a shooting, and the sort of main character is an ER nurse. So the victims come in to the ER and she is treating them and wants to figure out why the shooting happened. She suspects, she knows who was involved pretty much from the offset. She gets quite frustrated that the police aren't looking at the person she thinks is the suspect in what she would consider enough detail, and is kind of looking into it herself, or trying to like help out with the investigation to get a conclusion, because it's a few weeks and they're not really getting anywhere with it. There's a detective, Detective Sam Bailey, and he's the lead on the investigation. So the two of them are sort of chatting quite a lot and discussing where they think they should be looking in the investigation, things like that. And it's all to find out who sort of was the shooter in this circumstance. I rated this a 2-star. This book was a complete fail in my viewpoint. It sounds really harsh, but I just when I read the description, and obviously it's the ER nurse looking into the kind of investigation, or that's kind of the premise, I was curious from the perspective of, I love kind of these whodunits, these mysteries, these figuring stuff out, and I've never seen one written from the perspective of an ER nurse before, and I thought this could be really good or it could be crap. There's a reason these are not written from the perspective of an ER nurse. Like, I was dubious about how successful this would be, but curious to see if it could be pulled off. I don't think it was pulled off in my view. Everything I was reading in the book, it just kept bringing back to me, why is this nurse getting so involved? Why is she sticking her roar in? Like, there's no reason that this nurse would be this involved in an investigation. Like, there were links put in, like she was having to treat the person that she thought was the suspect, and she just thought it was obvious that, you know, he was the culprit and the police were just dismissing it. And I get that you would be frustrated about that kind of thing, but I feel like it's something you would bitch about to your colleagues in the staff room rather than actually be meeting the detective and talking about things and all that. And I just felt it was so forced. I was like, an ER nurse would not be poking her nose into a police investigation this much. It just didn't feel normal in any way. And they made a link to forensics. Like, I think it's the start of a series, and I think she's going to be involved in a more forensic kind of capacity, which will try and strengthen this link to the police, I imagine, because it's very tentative at the minute. But I won't be reading on. I think it will make more sense once she has that forensic link than she did in this book. But I hated the character. The main character was so smug and she was so rude, and I just didn't find her likable at all. And she was meant to be this really clever, valuable employee. Like, the ER department thought she was brilliant. She did a bit of work in the ICU and they thought she was brilliant. And then the guy in forensics is like trying to move heaven and earth to get her to work in his lab or whatever. And I'm like, okay, how are you just magically amazing at all of these things? That's just not really... I don't feel like that is a logical thing. I don't think you would just be this fantastic person at every single thing you do. And then obviously she's poking her nose into the police investigation. And I'm like, so what, you think you're a detective now too? Like, you're a super nurse and you're a detective and you're clearly right and the police are all stupid. That was kind of the vibe. It was like she basically felt like she was doing a better job at figuring out this crime than the police were doing. And admittedly, the police seemed a bit dim. Not gonna lie. But so was she. I mean, admittedly, I think everyone in the book could do with a bit of sharpness. Their intelligence was not high in this book. They were missing completely obvious things. I mean, I don't mind figuring stuff out before the author reveals. I don't have an issue with that, as long as it, like, you're kind of waiting for the characters to figure it out and you get the tension from that. This is just frustrating. It was like, it was obvious what had happened. There were a couple of details you couldn't figure out until more information was given, but you figured it out really easily, and it was just like, well, how has no one else figured that out? A monkey could figure that out by now. It was so simplistic. And the characters, like I said, I don't find Jessie likable at all. You know, you could argue she was like this Supergirl, Power Woman, go girl power kind of girl, but I just was like, it's just unrealistic, and she comes across as smug and arrogant, and I just didn't like her at all. There was a love triangle, which was just cringeworthy, absolutely cringeworthy. It was obviously not gonna work. She was like, even at the start, she's like, well, I like him, so he must be rubbish. And I'm like, well, if you know that, then why are you with him? But she's like, she was trying to convince herself that he was what she needed, but then equally she's like, but I know I have a bad picker. And it's like, well, just what? Oh, I don't know. It was just cringeworthy. It just wasn't fun to read. Like, I read the book fairly quickly, but more just because I wanted it to be over. Yeah. It got a 2. It had bits that could have been good, but I just feel like it was far too simplistic. There wasn't enough grit, but it was obvious who had done it. The character sucked. So, I mean, my opinion, you know, you may disagree with me, but this is not one I would recommend. I just didn't find it worth my time at all. I read it just because I have a hard time DNFing, to be honest. Meh. Not a fan. Absolutely not a fan. Maybe the series will get better, but I'm never going to know. I'm not continuing. And the last book I'm going to speak about today is Back to Another Strong 4-star. So this one is Her Sister's Child by Alison James. Another arc that I got from NetGalley, and thankfully another good one. I really enjoyed this. So the premise of this one is the main character is called Paula, and when she was younger, her older sister, who was a drug addict, an alcoholic, bit of a mess, she got pregnant, and she hid the pregnancy because she didn't want the baby to be taken away by social services. And so Paula kind of helped her keep the secret. Paula went away on like a family holiday, and in the time she was away, Lizzie gave birth, and she woke up to find the baby missing, and then not long after that, Lizzie also died. So when Paula had come back home, they got the news that Lizzie had passed away, and she was like, well, what about the baby? And no one was like, there was no baby when the body was found. So like, they weren't looking for a baby because they didn't know there was one. Paula, this has tormented her for years, that she doesn't know what happened to Lizzie's baby, because she saw the belly, she felt it kick, she's convinced there was a baby there. And you know, it's got a few years on now, 15, 16 years had passed. Paula's now a mother herself, and is even more determined to find out what happened to Lizzie's baby, because she's like, she just can't fathom what has happened to this child, and feels like she owes it to her sister to find out. She ends up chatting to an old friend who also knew about the pregnancy, so she realizes it wasn't as secret as she thought it was, and they end up starting to look into what happened, and that sort of kicks off the tale. And this book was a bit of a riot. It was mental. I don't want to spoil anything, but they're looking into what happened to this child, and it's all very convoluted and crazy, and like, it's not probably like the most realistic. Like, if this kind of situation was to happen, like, a lot of factors would have to align for this kind of situation to happen. But I had a great time reading it. I stayed up all night reading it, and I was really, really tired the next day. So I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, were the characters particularly likable? No, not really. They were all quite flawed in their own way, but it didn't take away from the novel. It kind of just added to it. I kind of figured it out before the reveals, but not in a bad way. Like, it was like I knew, and I was waiting for the characters to find out, and I was like, oh my god, but I know what's happened and you need to figure it out. And I was just really, really into it. I could not put it down. I thought it was really, really good. I would say my only criticism, because I've put it as a 4-star, and I think it's a bit, I feel like I'm being picky because I did really enjoy the book, but the meeting with the old acquaintance that kind of kicked off the investigation, I don't know, I just felt like it wasn't the strongest start. And then obviously it went into this in-depth investigation, but it was with this person she hadn't spoken with for a long time, and I'm like, if you met someone that you hadn't spoken to for a long time, would you start going into this in-depth investigation with them? I don't know. I just question how strong a point that was to kick off the novel. The rest of the book made up for it. I'm not criticising that too much, but I do feel like that was the weaker point, was the start. And then there was a bit of a love interest kind of situation, which was not necessary. I don't really get why there had to be the love interest that was there. I felt like it was pointless, and just, it was like, well, we may as well. That's kind of how it felt. I was like, this book has got so much going on. You didn't need to have the love interest situation. Why can't in these books, I made this comment in about the other book that I read, The She, Myself and I, sometimes there can just be a friendship. Why does it always have to be a romance? Like, I like romance. I deliberately read romance. I love a romance. I like people getting together and being happy. I'm all for that. I'm not like anti-romance. I'm not anything like that. I genuinely like it in the majority of my books, and I pick books that I know have a romance in them. But in a thriller, that's not what I'm looking for, really. Like, unless it's one of these long-standing series, like, you know, I'm obsessed with the Maeve Kerrigan books, and they obviously have relationships in them, but we're talking about a series of books, it's like 8 or 9 books or something like that, and you're looking at the characters intertwining over this length of time, and it's very genuine, and you can feel the characters growing together, and they're friends, and then they're more, and then they're not, and it's good and it adds to the book. In a one-book standalone thriller, where you're reading it to find out what happened to a missing baby, why did there have to be romance? Why? Why? There was no purpose for this at all. It wasn't cringeworthy. It didn't bother me that much, despite my little rant here. I just feel like you don't always have to have a romance. Sometimes a man and a woman can just be friends. It doesn't always have to be sexual. And I just felt like there was no point in it being sexual, other than the fact that we're both single. It's like, well, we're both single. Why not? I don't know. Anyway, rant over. This was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I devoured it in a matter of hours. And I would definitely recommend anyone that likes these kind of thrillers to give it a go. I found it really, really good. So we're ending on a strong note. So yeah, it was a pretty good month. You know, we had the one blip of a 2-star. Most were 4-star. But overall, the 7 books I read were pretty strong this month. So I can't complain too much. I hope you enjoyed this video, and will give me a little thumbs up if you did, because it really helps. And hopefully you will stick with me, and then maybe check out my TBR video, see what I'm going to be reading for next month. And if you want to look at any of the books that I've mentioned, I'll list all the titles that I spoke about down below. And hopefully see you again soon. Bye!